My husband Oscar emptied our joint accounts, all $47,000, to pay for his mistress's breast augmentation. Esther will never know, he whispered to Sabrina as I pretended to sleep. What he didn't know was that my grandmother's $10 million inheritance had already been transferred to my private account 3 days earlier, and I was about to make his betrayal the most expensive mistake of his life. The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I lay perfectly still, listening to my husband of 8 years make plans to steal from me. Oscar's voice was barely above a whisper. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But after years of marriage, I knew every inflection, every tone that meant he was hiding something. The surgery is scheduled for next Tuesday, he murmured into his phone, thinking I was still asleep. Dr. Martinez wants the full payment up front, $27,000 for the procedure, plus another $20,000 for the recovery suite you wanted. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed. $27,000. For what surgery? And who was he talking to at 6:30 in the morning? I know it's expensive, Sabrina, but you deserve this, Oscar continued, his voice taking on that tender quality I hadn't heard directed at me in months. The money from our joint accounts should cover everything. Esther will never know. She rarely checks the statements anyway. Sabrina. The name hit me like ice water in my veins. I knew that name. Sabrina Torres, the 24-year-old marketing coordinator at Oscar's architecture firm. The same Sabrina who'd been working late with my husband for the past 6 months. The same one whose laugh I'd heard echoing from his home office during their project calls that ran until midnight. I forced myself to remain motionless as Oscar slipped out of bed, padding quietly to the bathroom. The shower started, and only then did I allow myself to breathe. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, quickly opening our joint banking app. The balance that should have shown $47,000, our combined savings from 8 years of marriage, now displayed $3,443,000. Gone. The timestamps on the transactions told their own story. 3 separate transfers over the past week, all while I'd been visiting my dying grandmother in Portland. While I'd been holding Grandma May's hand during her final days, my husband had been systematically draining our life savings to fund his mistress's cosmetic surgery. But Oscar had made one critical error in his betrayal. He had no idea what had happened during those 5 days in Portland. 3 days ago, as Grandma May lay in her hospital bed, she'd pressed a manila envelope into my hands with fingers that barely had strength left. "This is for you, my darling Esther," she'd whispered, her voice paper-thin but her eyes still sharp. "I've kept it from the family lawyers, from everyone. It's been waiting for the right moment." Inside that envelope were documents that changed everything. Stock certificates, property deeds, and account information for investments my grandmother had quietly accumulated over 70 years. The woman everyone thought lived modestly in her small Portland home had actually been a financial genius, turning her late husband's modest life insurance policy into a $10 million portfolio through decades of careful investing. "I watched how Oscar treats you at family gatherings," Grandma May had said, her grip surprisingly firm as she held my hand. "A man who truly loves his wife doesn't spend family dinners checking his phone and making excuses to step outside for calls. I've seen his type before, sweetheart. This inheritance stays between you and me until you decide what to do with it." The irony was breathtaking. While Oscar was celebrating what he thought was the perfect crime, stealing our entire savings while his wife was distracted by grief, he had no idea that I was now worth more than he could earn in 2 lifetimes. I heard the bathroom door open and quickly set my phone aside, feigning sleep as Oscar returned to the bedroom. He moved with the careful quiet of someone who believed he was getting away with something, gathering his clothes for work with practiced stealth. "Morning, beautiful," he said when I finally woke up and stretched. His smile was the same charming, one that had convinced me to marry him 8 years ago, but now it looked like a mask. "How are you feeling? I know coming back from Portland has been tough." "I'm managing," I replied, studying his face for any sign of guilt. There was none. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than he'd been in months, practically humming as he knotted his tie. "Oscar, I was thinking we should review our finances soon. Plan for the future, maybe make some investments." For just a moment, his smile flickered. "Oh, you know how boring that stuff is for US. I've got everything handled. Why don't you focus on getting back to your art? I know the gallery has been asking about your next exhibition. My art." For 8 years, Oscar had supported my career as a photographer, encouraging me to pursue gallery showings and fine art rather than commercial work. I'd thought it was love, his belief in my artistic vision. Now I wondered if it had simply been convenient, a wife too absorbed in her creative work to pay attention to disappearing money. "Actually, I've been thinking about being more involved in our financial planning," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Grandma May taught me a lot about investments before she passed. I'd like to honor her memory by being smarter with money." Oscar's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Esther, sweetheart, you're grieving. This isn't the time to make big financial decisions. Let me handle the practical stuff while you process your loss." The condescension in his voice was nothing new, but hearing it now, knowing what I knew, felt like nails on a chalkboard. For 8 years, Oscar had positioned himself as the financial expert in our marriage, the practical one who handled bills and investments while I played with my cameras and pursued my little art projects. I'd been grateful for his management, trusting him completely with our shared future. That trust was now shattered, but Oscar didn't know it yet. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jenna. "Coffee today? You've been through so much with your grandmother's passing. I'm worried." "About you. Jenna Martinez." Yes, she shared a last name with the plastic surgeon Oscar had mentioned, though they weren't related. Jenna was a financial crimes investigator for the state attorney general's office, someone I'd known since college who had a particular talent for unraveling complex fraud cases. If anyone could help me understand the full scope of Oscar's betrayal and figure out how to respond, it would be her. "I'd love that," I texted back. "I have a lot to tell you." As Oscar kissed my forehead goodbye, heading off to his architecture firm where Sabrina was undoubtedly already planning her post-surgery recovery, I made a decision. He thought he was married to a naive artist who'd never notice $43,000 missing from their accounts. He was about to discover he'd married someone very different, someone who now had 10 million reasons to make him regret every lie he'd ever told. The coffee shop where Jenna and I met was one of those places designed for private conversations. Dim lighting, scattered tables with enough space between them that whispered secrets couldn't travel. I'd chosen it deliberately, knowing that what I was about to share would sound impossible to anyone who knew Oscar as the charming, successful architect he appeared to be. Jenna arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, her sharp eyes immediately scanning my face for signs of how I was really coping with Grandma May's death. What she saw there made her lean forward with concern. "Esther, you look like you haven't slept in days. I know losing your grandmother was devastating, but there's something else, isn't there?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the banking app, with our depleted joint account. "Oscar has been stealing from us. $43,000 in 5 days, while I was in Portland saying goodbye to Grandma May." Jenna's professional demeanor kicked in immediately. She took my phone, studying the transaction details with the focused intensity that made her so good at her job. "These transfers, they're not to any account I recognize. Do you know where the money went?" "His mistress's breast augmentation surgery," I said quietly, watching Jenna's eyebrows shoot up. "I overheard him this morning, talking to someone named Sabrina about a procedure scheduled for next Tuesday. 27,000 for the surgery, 20 more for some luxury recovery suite." "Sabrina Torres?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jenna's voice was sharp with recognition. Young, blonde, works in marketing. My stomach dropped. You know her? Not personally, but I've seen her around the courthouse. She was dating a defendant in one of our embezzlement cases last year. Guy named Harold Brennan who was skimming from his construction company to fund his girlfriend's lifestyle. The case fell apart when she suddenly had money for a good lawyer. Jenna's expression darkened. Esther, if this is the same woman, she has a pattern of dating men with access to money that isn't theirs. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You think she targeted Oscar deliberately? I think you need to assume that possibility. In my experience, women who convince married men to steal for cosmetic procedures aren't operating spontaneously. Jenna handed my phone back, her investigator's mind already working. Tell me about their relationship. When did it start? I thought back to the timeline I'd been trying to ignore for months. Oscar hired her last February, said the firm needed fresh marketing ideas, someone who understood social media. She started working late with him by March, and by April he was coming home talking about her insights, her creativity. And when did your financial situation change? That's the thing. It didn't. We've been careful savers, both of us contributing to that joint account for years. Oscar's been managing most of our investments, and I trusted him completely. I paused, realizing how naive that sounded now. Until 3 days ago. Jenna waited for me to continue, her patience the same quality that made witnesses feel safe, enough to tell her everything. Grandma May left me an inheritance, a significant one. I lowered my voice even further. $10 million, Jenna. Stocks, properties, investments she'd been quietly building for 70 years. She transferred everything to an account in my name alone 3 days before she died. The shock on Jenna's face was genuine. 10 million? Esther, that changes everything about this situation. If Oscar doesn't know about the inheritance, he has no idea. Grandma May specifically kept it between us. She never trusted him, said she could see through his charm. I felt tears threatening, but pushed them back. She was protecting me, and I was too blind to see I needed protection. Jenna pulled out a small notebook, her professional habits taking over. Okay, let's think about this strategically. Oscar believes he's married to someone whose biggest financial asset is a joint savings account he just emptied. He doesn't know. You're now independently wealthy, which gives you options he can't anticipate. What kind of options? The kind that let you control the narrative instead of just reacting to his betrayal. Jenna's smile was cold and calculating. In my line of work, we call this managed discovery. You get to choose when, how, and where. Oscar learns what you know. You get to decide whether this ends with a quiet divorce or a very public reckoning. The idea of having control over this situation was intoxicating after feeling so powerless this morning. What would you do? First, I'd document everything. Every transaction, every conversation you can remember, every late-night phone call. If Sabrina is who I think she is, there might be a pattern of financial manipulation that goes beyond just your marriage. Jenna paused, studying my face. But before we go down that road, I need to ask you something difficult. How long has Oscar been financially controlling in your marriage? The question hit me like a physical blow, because I'd never thought of it that way. But as I considered it, memories flooded back. Oscar's insistence on managing our investments, his subtle dismissals when I asked about our financial planning, the way he'd encouraged me to focus on my art instead of commercial photography that might have made me more financially independent. He's been managing our money since we got married, I admitted. I thought it was because he was better with numbers, more practical. He always made it sound like he was protecting me from boring financial details. And your art career? Has it been financially successful? I've had gallery showings, some sales, but Oscar always said not to worry about the money side. that my art was too important to be reduced to commercial concerns. The pattern was becoming clearer and more humiliating. He kept me financially dependent while making it seem like support. Jenna nodded grimly. Classic pattern. He needed you dependent enough to not question his financial decisions, but successful enough in your own field to not feel completely powerless. Until now, I agreed, feeling something cold and determined settling in my chest. Jenna, I want to know everything about Sabrina, about where our money really went, about whether this is part of something bigger. That's going to require some investigation. Are you prepared for what we might find? I thought about Oscar's casual betrayal, his tender voice as he planned to spend our life savings on another woman's body, his condescending dismissal of my desire to understand our finances. I'm prepared for anything, I said. What I'm not prepared to do is let him get away with this. Jenna's investigation began that afternoon with a phone call that would change everything. While I sat in her car outside Oscar's architectural firm, she dialed a number she'd pulled from her professional contacts. May, it's Jenna Martinez from the AG's office. I need a favor, a quiet one. She paused, listening. Remember that embezzlement case from last year, Harold Brennan? His girlfriend Sabrina Torres? She's surfaced again, and I think we might have a pattern. May Holloway turned out to be a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases, someone Jenna had worked with on multiple occasions. More importantly, she was someone who understood the value of discretion and had resources that could uncover information quickly. She'll meet us tonight, Jenna said after ending the call. But first, we need to do some reconnaissance of our own. That's how I found myself sitting in a car across from my husband's office building at 5:30 in the evening, watching employees stream out as the workday ended. I'd been here countless times for company parties and holiday events, but never as a suspicious wife gathering evidence of infidelity. There, I whispered, pointing to a figure emerging from the glass lobby. That's her. Sabrina Torres was exactly what I'd expected and somehow worse. 24 years old with the kind of carefully maintained blonde hair that cost more than most people's rent, wearing a designer dress that I recognized from a boutique Oscar had once called overpriced. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned whether she deserved the expensive things in her life. She's pretty, Jenna observed clinically. But look at how she's dressed. That's a $2,000 Valentino dress, and those shoes are Louboutin. On a marketing coordinator's salary, that wardrobe suggests supplemental income. Oscar emerged 30 seconds later, and my heart clenched as I watched him scan the street before approaching Sabrina. Even from a distance, I could see the intimate way he touched her elbow, the smile he gave her that used to be reserved for me. They didn't kiss. Too public, too risky. But the body language between them spoke of familiarity and comfort. This wasn't a new affair. It was an established relationship with its own rhythms and boundaries. How long do you think this has been going on? I asked, watching them walk toward separate cars. Based on the comfort level I'm seeing? At least 6 months, probably longer. Jenna started her engine as Oscar's BMW pulled into traffic. But here's what's interesting. They're being careful about public displays. That suggests they've discussed the risks, planned how to avoid detection. We followed Sabrina's white Lexus, another expensive choice for someone earning a marketing coordinator's salary, through downtown traffic to an upscale shopping district. She parked outside a medical building that housed several plastic surgeons. Offices, consultation appointment, Jenna murmured as we watched Sabrina enter the building. Wanna bet it's with Dr. Martinez? 20 minutes later, May Holloway called Jenna's phone. I've got preliminary information on your Sabrina Torres, she said, her voice crackling through the speaker. You were right to be suspicious. We drove to May's office, a small suite above a coffee shop that looked deliberately unremarkable. May herself was in her 50s, with sharp gray eyes and the kind of understated appearance that helped her blend into any environment. Sabrina Torres has been very busy, May said, spreading a collection of photographs and documents across her desk. In the past 3 years, she's been romantically linked to 4 different men, all married, all with access to significant funds. The photographs showed Sabrina with various men at restaurants, hotels, and social events. I recognized the pattern immediately. Intimate dinners, weekend getaways, the kind of relationship that looked serious from the outside. Harold Brennan was just the beginning, May continued. Before him, there was Alvin Chen, a bank manager who embezzled $40,000 to buy her a car. Before that, Stan Walsh, who took out a second mortgage on his family home to fund her business ventures. The pattern is always the same. She targets married men with financial access and emotional vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Men who feel unappreciated at home, overlooked professionally, or going through midlife transitions. She has a talent for making them feel special, understood, worthy of a young woman's attention. May's expression was grim. She studies them first, learns their weaknesses, then positions herself as the solution to whatever's missing in their lives. The description hit uncomfortably close to home. Oscar had been struggling professionally lately, losing out on several major contracts to younger, more innovative firms. He'd been questioning his career choices, wondering if he'd peaked too early. I'd tried to be supportive, but perhaps I hadn't understood how deeply the rejections had affected his ego. So she targeted Oscar because he was vulnerable, I said. More than that, May replied, pulling out a thick folder. She researched him extensively before accepting the job at his firm. Property records, social media analysis, professional background checks. She knew about your joint finances, your art career, even your grandmother's illness. The violation felt complete and nauseating. She knew about Grandma May? Public records show she'd been tracking your grandmother's property holdings for months. Medical privacy laws prevented her from accessing health records, but she knew enough to understand that an inheritance might be coming. May paused. What she didn't know was the size of that inheritance, because your grandmother was very careful about keeping her wealth private. Jenna leaned forward. So Sabrina thought she was targeting a couple with moderate savings and potential inheritance prospects, not realizing Esther was about to become independently wealthy. Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting, May said, opening another file. The breast augmentation isn't her first cosmetic procedure funded by a married boyfriend. Harold Brennan paid for rhinoplasty. Stan Walsh funded liposuction. It's part of her long-term investment strategy. Use each relationship to fund improvements that make her more attractive to the next target. The calculated nature of it was breathtaking. Sabrina wasn't just Oscar's mistress, she was a professional. Predator who had turned seducing married men into a career. There's more, May continued. She's been photographing herself in expensive settings, building a social media presence that suggests wealth and success. The goal appears to be transitioning, from targeting middle-class married men to attracting genuinely wealthy single men. So Oscar is just a stepping stone, I said, feeling an odd mixture of hurt and relief. A very expensive stepping stone. The breast augmentation isn't just about improving her appearance, it's about graduating to a higher class of target, rich. Men who can afford women who look like they belong in their world. I thought about Oscar's tenderness toward Sabrina, his willingness to steal our entire savings for her surgery. He believed he was in love, that he was the center of her world. The truth was that he was just another mark in her elaborate con game. What happens next? I asked. May smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that reminded me that she'd spent years hunting people like Sabrina. Now we give her exactly what she thinks she wants, she said. And we make sure Oscar learns the truth in the most devastating way possible. May's office felt like a war room as she laid out the evidence of Sabrina's systematic fraud across multiple relationships. The documents, photographs, and financial records painted a picture so damning that I had to remind myself this was real, not some elaborate fiction. Let's start with the timeline, May said, pulling out a detailed chart. Sabrina Torres began working at Oscar's firm on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Not a coincidence. She specifically requested to start on that date, claiming it would be memorable and romantic for her new beginning. The symbolism made my stomach turn. While I'd been planning a quiet Valentine's dinner at home, my husband's future mistress had been strategically positioning herself in his professional life. Within 2 weeks, she'd identified Oscar as her primary target, May continued, showing me surveillance photos. These were taken in March, lunch meetings that gradually became longer, more intimate. Notice how she's dressed progressively more provocatively as the weeks progress. The photos showed a careful seduction in stages. Early images captured Sabrina in conservative business attire, looking professional and approachable. By late March, the necklines were lower, the skirts shorter, the body language more suggestive. She'd been slowly conditioning Oscar to see her as more than just a colleague. Here's where it gets calculating, May said, opening a laptop. I pulled her social media data from the past year. She'd been researching Oscar's interests, hobbies, even his favorite restaurants, long before she applied for the job at his firm. The screen showed Sabrina's Instagram account, and I felt sick as I scrolled through posts that seemed designed to appeal to my husband. Photos of her at jazz clubs, Oscar's favorite music, pictures from architecture museums with captions about appreciating good design. Even shots of her cooking Italian food, which Oscar had always claimed was his specialty. She built herself into his perfect woman, I said, the manipulation so thorough it was almost impressive. It gets worse, Jenna added, pulling out a folder of financial documents. May and I spent the afternoon tracking money flows between Sabrina and her previous targets. The pattern is always the same. She starts with small requests. A dinner, here, a shopping trip there, gets them comfortable with spending money on her before making the big ask. May nodded, spreading out bank statements. With Harold Brennan, it was a family emergency that required $10,000. With Stan Walsh, she needed $15,000 for a business opportunity that would let her become financially independent. With Alvin Chen, it was $30,000 for her mother's medical bills. And with Oscar? With Oscar, she chose cosmetic surgery because it plays into male psychology perfectly, May explained. It's supposedly for him. She's improving herself, to be more attractive to the man she loves. It makes the theft feel like an investment in their relationship rather than simple greed. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its sophistication. How did you gather all this information so quickly? Harold Brennan was eager to talk once I contacted him, May said with a grim smile. He's still paying off the card debt from their relationship. Apparently, Sabrina promised him they'd get married once he left his wife. Instead, she disappeared the day after her rhinoplasty was complete. She showed me a photo of Harold, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and the defeated posture of someone who'd learned an expensive lesson about trust. He kept detailed records of every expense, hoping to use them in divorce proceedings. Instead, his wife took him back, and now he's helping me track Sabrina's other victims. Stan Walsh wasn't as cooperative initially, Jenna added. But when May explained that helping us might prevent other men from being victimized, he opened up. Same pattern. Promises of marriage, expensive gifts, then abandonment once she got what she needed. The scope of Sabrina's operation was staggering. So she's been doing this for years? At least 4 years that we can document, probably longer, May confirmed. And she's been getting better at it, more sophisticated in her targeting, more professional in her approach. Oscar represents her biggest score yet, $43,000 for a single procedure. I stared at the evidence, feeling a mixture of rage and humiliation. All this time, I thought Oscar was having a midlife crisis, maybe feeling neglected at home. I blamed myself for not being more supportive, more attentive. That's exactly what she counted on, Jenna said firmly. Women like Sabrina exploit our tendency to look inward when marriages struggle. While you were wondering what you'd done wrong, she was systematically dismantling your husband's judgment and moral compass. May pulled out another set of documents. Here's what really matters for your situation. We have documented proof of fraud that goes beyond simple adultery. Sabrina's been operating under false pretenses from the beginning. She lied on her job application about her educational background, falsified references, and concealed her history of financial manipulation. What does that mean legally? It means Oscar isn't just a cheating husband. He's the victim of a professional con artist, Jenna explained. That changes everything about how we approach this situation. Instead of a simple divorce case, we're looking at criminal fraud charges against Sabrina and potential civil recovery of your stolen funds. May leaned forward, her expression intense. But here's the crucial question. Do you want to save your marriage or destroy it? Because the approach we take depends entirely on whether you see Oscar as a victim to be rescued or a perpetrator to be punished. The question hung in the air like a challenge. 3 days ago, I would have said I wanted to save my marriage, that Oscar was the love of my life worth fighting for. Now, looking at evidence of months of calculated deception, I wasn't sure which version of Oscar was real. The man I'd married or the man who'd stolen our life savings for his mistress's breast augmentation. I need to see more, I said finally. I need to understand exactly how deep this goes before I decide anything. May smiled approvingly. Smart approach, because what I've shown you so far is just the foundation. Wait until you see what Sabrina has planned for after the surgery. She pulled out a final folder, thicker than all the others combined. This is where it gets really interesting. Sabrina isn't planning to disappear after the breast augmentation. She's planning to escalate. Blood ran cold. Escalate how? She's been researching divorce law, specifically how to position herself as the wronged party in an affair scenario. She's documented every gift Oscar has given her, every dinner, every hotel room. If I had to guess, she's planning to reveal the affair to you herself, but as the victim of a predatory older man who promised to leave his wife. The audacity was breathtaking. She's going to claim Oscar victimized her? While simultaneously positioning herself to receive ongoing financial support, May confirmed, either through a continuation of their relationship or through hush money to keep quiet about the affair. She's been building toward this moment for months. I felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. Sabrina Torres had chosen the wrong woman to destroy. She'd calculated that I was a naive artist who could be easily manipulated or discarded. She had no idea she was about to face someone with $10 million and a growing network of allies who specialized in taking down exactly her type of predator. Show me everything, I said. I want to know her complete plan before I decide how to destroy it. May opened the thick folder with the deliberate care of someone revealing a bomb. Inside were photographs, documents, and printed communications that painted a picture so disturbing I had to grip the edge of her desk to steady myself. What you're about to see goes beyond simple financial fraud, May said quietly. Sabrina hasn't just been targeting Oscar. She's been orchestrating the systematic destruction of your marriage from the inside. The first document was a printed email chain between Sabrina and someone named A. River at discreetconsulting.com. The subject line read, Carter Project, Phase 3 Implementation. Who is A. Rivera? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Alicia. Rivera. She runs what she calls a relationship consulting business, but it's actually a service that helps women extract maximum financial benefit from affairs with married men, May explained. Think of it as coaching for professional mistresses. I read the email with growing horror. Subject, Carter Project, Phase 3. Implementation Sabrina. Excellent progress on Phase 2. Target's emotional dependency is now established and financial boundaries have been successfully eroded. Ready to proceed with Phase 3. Remember, the goal isn't just the surgery money, it's positioning for long-term extraction. You've done well isolating him from wife's financial awareness, but we need to accelerate the timeline. Recommend implementing crisis pregnancy scenario within 6 weeks of surgery recovery. This creates urgency for permanent commitment while wife is still unaware of relationship. Attached. Documentation templates for pregnancy claims. Recommended medical contacts for false confirmation. Timeline for maximum emotional impact. Fee for Phase 3 consultation, $15,000 as discussed. AR, my hands were shaking as I set down the email. She's planning to fake a pregnancy? It gets worse, Jenna said grimly, pulling out another document. Look at Sabrina's response. A. Phase 3 approved. Surgery scheduled for Tuesday. Recovery 2 on 3 weeks. Will implement pregnancy scenario by mid-next month. One complication. Wife's grandmother died last week. Oscar mentioned possible inheritance, but amount unknown. Should I accelerate timeline or investigate inheritance potential first? Also concerned about wife's friend Jenna Martinez, AG's office employee. If wife becomes suspicious, this could be problematic contact. Advise on risk. Assessment. The room went silent as the implications sank in. She knows about you, I said to Jenna. She's been tracking my relationships, identifying potential threats to her plan. And she knew about your grandmother's death before she finalized the surgery timeline, May added. This email is dated 2 days after your grandmother passed. She was calculating whether to steal the money immediately or wait to see if there was a bigger prize. I felt violated in a way that went beyond simple betrayal. She's been studying my entire life, Xiao nodded, pulling out a manila folder thick with photographs. These are surveillance photos taken over the past 3 months. Not by me, by someone Sabrina hired to document your routines, your relationships, your vulnerabilities. The photos showed me going about my daily life, completely unaware I was being watched. Pictures of me at the gallery where I exhibited my work, at the coffee shop where I met friends, even at the hospital in Portland visiting Grandma May. Someone had been following me, cataloging my movements, looking for weaknesses to exploit. The hospital photos are the most disturbing, May said, her voice tight with anger. She was documenting your grief, your emotional state during your grandmother's illness, gathering intelligence on how distracted you were, how vulnerable. One photo showed me crying in the hospital corridor after a particularly difficult conversation with doctors about Grandma May's prognosis. The photographer had captured my breakdown from across the waiting room, invading one of the most private moments of my life. She used my grief against me, I whispered. While I was focused on Grandma May, she convinced Oscar I was emotionally unavailable, that he deserved someone who could give him attention. Exactly. And look at this, Jenna said, pointing to another email exchange. She's been feeding Oscar specific talking points designed to create distance between you two. The printed conversation showed Sabrina coaching Oscar on how to make me feel guilty about my art career, my time with friends, even my devotion to my dying grandmother. Your wife seems very absorbed in her own world. Art, friends, family drama. When was the last time she really focused on you? You deserve someone who puts you first. It's natural for successful men to need intellectual stimulation. Your wife is talented, but her interests are so limited. You need someone who can discuss your work, understand your ambitions. I worry that you're giving so much to everyone else. Your firm, your wife's career, her family obligations. Who's taking care of Oscar's needs? She's been systematically poisoning his perception of me, I said. The manipulation so thorough it was almost artistic in its evil precision, while simultaneously positioning herself as everything you supposedly weren't, May confirmed. Available, supportive, interested in his work. She studied your marriage for months, identified every small complaint or moment of stress, then crafted herself into the perfect antidote. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. How long has this been planned? May pulled out a calendar marked with dates and annotations. Based on the evidence, she's been researching you and Oscar for at least 8 months before she applied for the job at his firm. This wasn't an opportunistic affair. It was a calculated campaign designed to destroy your marriage and extract maximum financial benefit. But why me? Why Oscar? We're not wealthy by most standards. That's where you're wrong, Jenna said, spreading out property records and financial documents. Sabrina did her homework. She knew about your joint assets, Oscar's earning potential, and most importantly, she knew your grandmother owned significant property in Portland. May pointed to a research report with my name on the cover. She hired a private investigator to research your family background. They identified your grandmother as a potential inheritance source, but underestimated the value significantly. They projected maybe $50,000 to $100,000, not $10 million. The realization hit me like a physical blow. So she targeted us specifically because she thought I was about to inherit money. Exactly. But she made a critical error, May said with satisfaction. She planned for a small inheritance that would make Oscar feel financially secure enough to leave you. She didn't plan for an inheritance large enough to make you completely independent of him. The irony was perfect and terrifying. Sabrina had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage to access what she thought was a modest inheritance, not knowing she was actually positioning me to discover her scheme while having the resources to destroy her completely. There's one more thing, May said, her expression darkening. The pregnancy plan isn't just about trapping Oscar. According to her communications with Alicia Rivera, if the pregnancy scenario succeeds, they're planning to blackmail you into a generous divorce settlement. Blackmail me how? By threatening to go public with Oscar's affair, his theft of marital assets, and his abandonment of his wife during her family crisis. They've been building a narrative where you're the cold, self-absorbed wife who drove your husband into the arms of a younger woman. The complete picture was finally clear. Sabrina hadn't just targeted my husband. She'd planned to destroy my reputation, my marriage, and my financial security, all while positioning herself as the victim of a predatory, older man. She'd chosen the wrong target, and she was about to learn exactly how expensive that mistake would be. The weight of Sabrina's calculated betrayal settled over me like a cold blanket, but instead of despair, I felt something sharper and more dangerous crystallizing in my chest. For the first time in days, my mind was completely clear. I'm not going to be their victim, I said, my voice steadier than it had been since this nightmare began. But I'm also not going to react emotionally and give them any advantage they can exploit. May leaned back in her chair, studying my face with approval. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Sabrina has made one critical miscalculation after another, and I want to use every single one against her. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the street. She researched my family for inheritance potential, but missed the real scope of what Grandma May left me. She's planned for a wife who would be financially devastated by divorce, not one who could buy and sell her 10 times over. Jenna pulled out her notepad, her investigator instincts kicking in. So we use the inheritance as leverage? Not leverage, strategic. Advantage. She doesn't know about the 10 million, which means she's still operating under assumptions that are completely wrong. I turned back to face them, feeling the familiar calm that came when I was analyzing a complex problem. My background isn't just in art, you know? Before I met Oscar, I worked in corporate consulting, helping companies identify and eliminate internal fraud. This was the piece of my history I rarely discussed, the career I'd set aside when Oscar convinced me to focus on my artistic passion. Now those analytical skills felt like weapons I could finally use. Sabrina thinks she's dealing with a naive artist who trusts her husband completely, I continued. She has no idea she's actually targeted someone who specialized in uncovering exactly the kind of systematic deception she's been running. May's eyes lit up with understanding. You want to investigate her the way you would a corporate fraud case. Exactly. But more than that, I want to feed her false information and watch her adapt her plan based on lies we control. The strategy was forming in my mind with crystal clarity. She's been gathering intelligence on me for months. Now it's time for her to receive some very specific intelligence that serves our purposes. I sat back down, pulling out my phone. First, we need to understand exactly what she knows about my current financial situation. Then we need to carefully control what she learns going forward. How do we do that without tipping her off? Jenna asked. The answer came to me with the satisfaction of a puzzle piece clicking into place. Oscar. He's been our weak link, but now he's going to be our asset. He thinks I'm completely unaware of his affair, which means anything I tell him, in confidence, will go straight to Sabrina. May grinned, catching on immediately. You want to use your husband as an unwitting double agent. Precisely. But we have to be careful about timing and information flow. I pulled out a piece of paper, sketching out a timeline. Sabrina's surgery is scheduled for Tuesday. That gives us 4 days to position the pieces exactly where we want them. The plan began forming with the methodical precision of my old consulting work. Here's what she expects. A wife who discovers the affair after the surgery, probably through a carefully orchestrated revelation designed to make her look like the victim, and Oscar like the predator. She's counting on my emotional reaction to cloud my judgment. Instead, May prompted, she's going to discover that her research was fatally incomplete, her timeline is completely compromised, and the woman she thought was an easy mark has been several steps ahead of her for days. I turned to Jenna. I need you to continue your official investigation, but carefully. No direct contact with Sabrina yet. I want her feeling secure and proceeding with her original plan. Can you do that without raising flags? Absolutely. My investigation is focused on her previous victims right now. She has no reason to know I'm connected to you personally. Good. May, I need you to expand the surveillance, but I want it targeted. Specifically, I need to know her exact movements, who she talks to, and most importantly, I need to document her continued coordination with this Alicia Rivera. May nodded, already making notes. What about the pregnancy plan? Do we try to prevent it or let it play out? The question required careful consideration. We let her think it's proceeding normally, but we make sure we have evidence of the premeditation. When she eventually claims to be pregnant with Oscar's child, I want to be able to prove it was calculated fraud, not an accident of passion. That's risky, Jenna warned. If she convinces Oscar she's pregnant, he might do something irreversible like leaving you or demanding a divorce. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. I felt the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. I'm going to accelerate my own timeline. Instead of waiting for Sabrina to reveal the affair on her terms, I'm going to control when and how it comes to light. I stood up again, energy coursing through me as the strategy crystallized. But first, I need to gather some intelligence of my own. Oscar thinks I'm grieving and distracted, completely focused on Grandma May's death. That gives me cover to do things that might seem suspicious under normal circumstances. Like what? May asked. Like consulting with divorce attorneys, moving assets to secure accounts, and documenting every aspect of our marriage and financial situation. I paused, thinking through the implications. I'm also going to start making some very specific comments to Oscar about our financial future, comments I know he'll share with Sabrina. The psychological warfare aspect of the plan was particularly satisfying. She's been manipulating him with carefully chosen words for months. Now it's my turn to plant some information and watch how she reacts. Jenna leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of information? The kind that will make her believe she needs to accelerate her timeline, that waiting for the pregnancy plan might mean missing a bigger opportunity. I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time since discovering Oscar's betrayal. I'm going to let her think that my grandmother's inheritance was even smaller than expected, that I'm actually financially stressed and vulnerable. You want her to get greedy and make mistakes, May said with admiration. I want her to overreach. The pregnancy plan is already risky because it requires her to maintain a complex lie for months. If she thinks there's immediate money to be grabbed, she might abandon the careful approach and get sloppy. The beauty of the strategy was its simplicity. Sabrina had spent months studying my weaknesses and exploiting them. Now I was going to feed her false information about those same weaknesses and watch her destroy herself, trying to exploit vulnerabilities that no longer existed. There's one more element, I said, pulling out my phone to check the time. I need to understand exactly how Oscar justifies this to himself. Is he genuinely in love with her, or does he know on some level that he's being manipulated? Why does that matter? Jenna asked. Because it determines whether he's a victim who can be saved or an accomplice who needs to be punished. I looked at both women, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. Either way, Sabrina Torres is going to learn that she chose the wrong family to destroy. And if Oscar is beyond saving? May asked quietly. I thought about the man I'd married 8 years ago, the life we'd built together, and the betrayal that had shattered it all. Then they can both face the consequences together. That evening, I implemented the first phase of my counterintelligence operation. Armed with my old corporate fraud investigation skills and a burning need for answers, I began systematically examining every aspect of my marriage through the lens of potential deception. The home office Oscar and I shared became my command center. While he was supposedly working late again, undoubtedly with Sabrina, I methodically went through our shared computer, financial documents, and personal records with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years uncovering corporate embezzlement. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Our shared laptop's browser history revealed a digital trail of deception spanning 8 months. Oscar had been researching divorce law, specifically how assets were divided in cases of adultery. More disturbing were his searches about financial hiding strategies and protecting assets during marriage dissolution. He'd been planning this much longer than even Sabrina's timeline suggested. I opened a new spreadsheet, applying the same systematic approach I'd used in corporate investigations. Column by column, I tracked every suspicious transaction, every unusual expense, every deviation from our normal financial patterns. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been systematically preparing to leave his marriage while extracting maximum financial benefit. The earliest suspicious transaction dated back 11 months. A $3,000 cash withdrawal with no corresponding expense in our joint records. I cross-referenced the date with Oscar's work calendar and felt my stomach drop. It was the same day Sabrina had started her previous job at a marketing firm across town, 3 months before she'd applied to work at Oscar's company. They'd known each other longer than either had admitted. I pulled up Oscar's credit card statements, scanning for patterns I'd missed when I'd trusted him completely. There, monthly charges to a storage facility I'd never heard of, dating back 10 months. Small amounts, easy to overlook among legitimate business expenses, but consistent enough to indicate something significant being stored there. My hands trembled as I called the storage facility, using the account number from Oscar's statements. Golden Gate Storage. This is Harold speaking. Hi, I'm calling about account 4B571. I'm Oscar Carter's wife, and I need to know what items we have in storage there. We're doing some insurance updating. There was a pause. Ma'am, I'd need to verify your identity, and honestly, your husband was very specific about that unit. He said only he should have access. The confirmation hit me like ice water. I understand. Could you at least tell me when he last accessed the unit? Well, I suppose that's not confidential. Looks like he was here yesterday evening, actually. Spent about an hour in there. Yesterday evening, when he'd told me he was working late on a project deadline. I ended the call and sat staring at the evidence mounting before me. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated dismantling of our marriage, planned meticulously over nearly a year. But there was more. Digging deeper into our financial records, I discovered that Oscar had been slowly transferring money from our joint accounts to personal accounts I'd never known existed. Small amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, spread over months and disguised as business expenses or necessary purchases. He'd stolen over $20,000 from us before the recent $43,000 theft for Sabrina's surgery. I found loan applications in Oscar's name using our house as collateral, applications I'd never seen or signed. Most had been rejected, but one had been approved. A $75,000 home equity line of credit that Oscar had established 3 months ago. The timing aligned perfectly with Sabrina's employment at his firm. My phone buzzed with a text from May. Emergency. Meeting. Found something big. Can you come to the office now? 20 minutes later, I sat in May's office staring at photographs that made the scope of Oscar's betrayal crystal clear. These were taken at the storage facility, May explained. I followed Oscar there after he left his office tonight. The photos showed Oscar loading boxes into his car from a storage unit filled with furniture, artwork, and personal items I recognized from our home. Pieces had been disappearing so gradually I hadn't noticed. A vintage lamp here, a small painting there, decorative items that held sentimental value. He's been systematically moving your belongings out of the house, May said grimly, preparing for a divorce where he could claim you abandoned the marriage by taking all your personal items. The final photo showed the most devastating evidence. Boxes labeled with my name and marked, "Evidence of wife's instability." Inside one partially open box, I could see my personal journals, prescription bottles, and what looked like correspondence with my therapist from 2 years ago when I'd gone through a brief period of anxiety. He's building a case to make you look mentally unstable, May continued. Classic strategy for gaining advantage in divorce proceedings. Claim the wife is emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and unable to manage her own affairs. I stared at the photos, understanding finally dawning. The inheritance. If he could have me declared incompetent to manage finances, he could potentially gain control of your grandmother's money through conservatorship proceedings, May confirmed. It's a long shot legally, but it shows the level of calculation we're dealing with. The phone records May had obtained showed the true scope of coordination between Oscar and Sabrina. Daily calls, sometimes lasting hours. Text messages that revealed not just an affair, but a partnership in systematic fraud. One message thread particularly stood out. Oscar. Storage unit updated. Have enough documentation to support instability claims. Sabrina. Perfect. Alicia says that's the key to bigger financial settlements. Wife looks crazy, husband looks like victim. Oscar. Surgery scheduled for Tuesday. After your recovery, we implement the pregnancy plan? Sabrina. Yes. Then you file for divorce citing adultery. Mine, not yours. I play the victim of an older man's manipulation. You get sympathy and assets. Oscar. And the inheritance money? Sabrina. If conservatorship works, we control everything. If not, generous divorce settlement out of guilt and public pressure. They'd plan to destroy not just my marriage, but my reputation and my mental health. They'd intended to steal my inheritance by having me declared incompetent, then disappear together while I was left with nothing. I looked up at May, feeling something, cold and final settle in my chest. They wanted to destroy my entire life, I said quietly. So that's exactly what I'm going to do to them. The final piece of Oscar and Sabrina's master plan revealed itself the next morning in the most casual way possible. I was pretending to sleep when Oscar's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Early enough that he thought I wouldn't be listening, but late enough that it wouldn't seem suspicious if I stirred. "Morning, beautiful," he answered, his voice taking on that tender quality that used to be reserved for me. "Ready for the big day?" Tomorrow was Sabrina's surgery. I kept my breathing steady as Oscar padded to the bathroom, thinking he was being discreet. "I know you're nervous about the procedure, but Dr. Martinez is the best. And in 6 weeks, when you're fully healed, we'll start the next phase." There was a pause as he listened to her response. "No, Esther still has no idea. She's been completely absorbed in dealing with her grandmother's estate paperwork." My blood chilled as I realized he was talking about me like I was an obstacle to overcome, rather than his wife of 8 years. "The inheritance wasn't as much as we hoped," Oscar continued, and I had to bite my lip to keep from reacting. "Only about $50,000 after taxes and funeral expenses, but that's actually better for our timeline. Means she'll be more dependent on our joint assets when the divorce happens." The lie was breathtaking. Oscar had no idea about the real inheritance because I'd followed Grandma May's advice to keep it completely private. He was making financial projections based on complete fiction, which meant their entire plan was built on false assumptions. "Alicia thinks 6 weeks is perfect timing for the pregnancy announcement," Oscar said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Esther will be emotionally devastated by the affair revelation. Then we hit her with the pregnancy news. She'll be so desperate to avoid public humiliation that she'll agree to whatever settlement terms we propose." I pressed my face into the pillow, using every ounce of self-control not to scream. They were planning to fake a pregnancy to manipulate me into a disadvantageous divorce settlement, counting on my desire to avoid scandal to make me compliant. "The conservatorship angle is our backup plan," Oscar continued. "I've been documenting her emotional instability since her grandmother got sick. If she fights the divorce terms, we present evidence that she's not competent to manage finances independently." The bathroom door opened, and Oscar returned to the bedroom, still talking quietly. "I know it seems harsh, but this is our chance at real financial security. Alicia's other clients have gotten settlements worth hundreds of thousands using this exact strategy. Our chance." As if stealing from his wife was a joint venture they were embarking on together. "I love you too," Oscar said softly before ending the call. Then he slipped back into bed beside me, pressing a gentle kiss to my shoulder. "Morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling today?" The casual affection after what I'd just heard made my skin crawl, but I managed to turn toward him with what I hoped looked like sleepy contentment. "Better. I think I'm finally starting to process everything with Grandma May." "I'm glad," he said, stroking my hair with the same hand that had just been holding a phone while he planned my financial and emotional destruction. "Take all the time you need to grieve. I'll handle everything else. Everything else. Like stealing. Our life savings and planning to have me declared mentally incompetent." After Oscar left for work, I called an emergency meeting with May and Jenna. We gathered at a different location this time, a private conference room at Jenna's office that was regularly swept for surveillance equipment. "They're not just planning to steal money," I told them, recounting the morning's overheard conversation. "They're planning to destroy my capacity to fight back by attacking my mental competency." May's expression was grim as she spread out new documents across the table. That aligns with what we found in Alicia Rivera's communications. She's been coaching multiple women in what she calls total asset extraction, not just getting money from affairs, but positioning the wife as the problem while the husband and mistress appear sympathetic. The documents showed a sophisticated operation. Alicia Rivera wasn't just coaching individual mistresses, she was running what amounted to a marriage destruction service, complete with legal strategies, psychological manipulation techniques, and media management for when affairs became public. "Look at this," Jenna said, pointing to a pricing sheet. "She charges $15,000 for basic extraction, getting money for immediate needs. $50,000 for relationship transition, helping the affair partner become the primary relationship. and $100,000 for total asset acquisition, gaining control of the wife's assets through legal manipulation. The scope was staggering. How many marriages has she destroyed? At least 30 that we can document over the past 5 years, May replied. The average settlement she's helped extract is over $200,000 per case. She's made herself wealthy by teaching women how to systematically destroy other women's lives. I stared at the evidence, understanding finally that I wasn't just dealing with my husband's affair and his mistress's greed. I was up against a professional network designed to transfer wealth from wives to mistresses through elaborate psychological and legal manipulation. They think they're dealing with a grieving widow who's emotionally unstable and financially naive, I said slowly. They have no idea I know about any of this, and they certainly don't know about the real inheritance, which gives us the perfect opportunity to feed them exactly the information we want them to have, May said with satisfaction. I pulled out my phone, looking at a text Oscar had sent an hour earlier. Working late again tonight, sweetheart. Don't wait up. He's going to be with Sabrina, probably finalizing tomorrow's surgery plans, I said, which means tonight is perfect for the next phase of our operation. Jenna leaned forward. What did you have in mind? I smiled, feeling the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together perfectly. It's time for Oscar to learn some very specific information about my emotional state and financial situation. Information that will make Sabrina and Alicia Rivera accelerate their timeline in exactly the way we want them to. You're going to manipulate the manipulators, May said approvingly. I'm going to give them enough rope to hang themselves, I corrected. And tomorrow, while Sabrina is unconscious under anesthesia, we're going to start pulling that rope tight. The next morning, as Sabrina was wheeled into surgery for her breast augmentation, I was building the team that would dismantle her entire operation. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she was unconscious and vulnerable, trusting that her plan was proceeding perfectly, I was assembling the very forces that would destroy her. My first call was to someone I'd hoped never to need, Diana Wakefield, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Diana had represented me briefly during a consultation years earlier when Oscar and I had hit a rough patch, but I'd ultimately decided to work on the marriage instead. Now, that previous consultation proved invaluable. Esther, I remember you, Diana said when I reached her private line. You chose reconciliation over litigation 8 years ago. I'm assuming circumstances have changed. Dramatically, I replied, sitting in my car outside the medical building where Sabrina was having her surgery. I need someone who specializes in complex financial fraud within marriages, preferably someone who's dealt with coordinated third-party manipulation. There was a pause. That's very specific. Are we talking about more than simple adultery? We're talking about systematic asset theft, planned mental competency challenges, and a professional network that teaches women how to extract maximum financial benefit from destroying marriages. Diana's interest was immediately palpable. I can be available this afternoon. My office 3 o'clock. Bring everything you have. My next call was to someone from my old corporate consulting days, Alvin Chen, a forensic accountant who specialized in complex financial investigations. Despite sharing a name with one of Sabrina's previous victims, this Alvin was someone I'd worked with on several high-stakes corporate fraud cases. Esther, it's been years, Alvin said warmly. I heard you'd gotten married and focused on your art. What can I do for you? I need a complete financial forensic investigation, but it has to be done discreetly and quickly. I'm dealing with systematic asset diversion and potential identity theft within my own marriage. Alvin's tone became immediately professional. How quickly do you need results? I need preliminary findings within 48 hours and a complete report within a week. Money is no object. I'll clear my schedule. Send me everything you have and I'll start immediately. The third call was the most emotionally difficult, to my sister-in-law, Harold's wife, who worked as a family court mediator. Harold wasn't just any family member. He was Oscar's younger brother, someone I'd grown close to over the years of family gatherings and holiday celebrations. "Esther, how are you holding up after your grandmother's passing?" Harold asked when I reached him. "Oscar mentioned you've been struggling with the grief." The casual mention of Oscar's lies about my emotional state made my jaw clench. "Actually, Harold, I need to talk to you about Oscar. Are you free for lunch today?" Something in my tone must have alarmed him. "Is everything okay? You sound different?" "Everything is very much not okay, and I need your help. Can we meet privately? It's about Oscar, and it's serious." Harold agreed to meet me at a quiet restaurant across town. When I arrived, I found him already waiting, his expression concerned and confused. Harold had always been the steady, reliable Carter brother, the one who'd married his college sweetheart, built a successful accounting practice, and never gave anyone reason to worry. "What's going on, Esther?" he asked as soon as I sat down. "You sounded frightened on the phone." I pulled out a tablet containing some of the evidence May and Jenna had compiled. "I need you to look at this, but I need you to promise me you'll hear everything before you react." For the next hour, I walked Harold through the systematic betrayal I'd uncovered. I showed him the financial records, the communication intercepts, the evidence of the professional network designed to destroy marriages. Harold's face went through a progression of emotions: disbelief, anger, disgust, and finally, a cold fury I'd never seen from him before. "This is my brother," he said quietly, staring at the evidence. "The man I've looked up to my entire life." "I know this is devastating, Harold, but I need you to understand, this isn't just about Oscar having an affair. This is about a systematic plan to destroy my financial security and mental health." Harold was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. As an accountant, he understood the financial implications better than most. "The conservatorship angle," he said finally. "If they succeeded in having you declared incompetent, they could potentially access your inheritance." "That's exactly what they're planning. But Harold, there's something else. Something Oscar doesn't know." I took a deep breath. My grandmother's inheritance wasn't $50,000. It's $10 million. Harold's eyes widened. $10 million? Esther, that changes everything about this situation. It means they're not just planning to steal my life savings. They're planning to steal a fortune they don't even know exists. And I'm going to use that advantage to make sure they face the full consequences of what they've done. Harold leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "What do you need from me?" "I need someone in the family who can document Oscar's behavior, someone who can testify to his character and his capacity for deception. I need someone who can help me understand how he's been justifying this to himself. And you need someone who can help you protect your assets while this plays out," Harold added, his accountant's mind immediately grasping the practical implications. "Exactly. But more than that, I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who knew the Oscar I married and can help me understand how he became the man who could plan to destroy his wife's life for money." Harold reached across the table and took my hand. "You have that someone. Whatever you need, Esther. Family doesn't do this to family." The alliance was growing stronger. Diana Wakefield would handle the legal strategy, Alvin Chen would uncover the complete financial picture, and Harold would provide both emotional support and professional expertise. Combined with May's investigation skills and Jenna's law enforcement connections, I now had a team capable of taking on not just Oscar and Sabrina, but the entire network that had taught them how to destroy me. "There's one more thing," I told Harold as we prepared to leave. "I need you to act normally around Oscar. Can you do that?" Harold's smile was cold and determined. "I've been watching my brother lie to family for months without realizing it. Acting normal will be the easy part." As I drove home, I felt the satisfaction of pieces falling into place. Sabrina was spending her day in surgical recovery, trusting that her plan was proceeding perfectly. Oscar was at work, believing his wife was grieving and distracted. Neither of them had any idea that their victim had just assembled a team of experts whose sole purpose was ensuring they paid for every lie they'd told and every dollar they'd stolen. While Sabrina recovered from surgery in her luxury recovery suite, paid for with my stolen money, Alvin Chen was systematically dismantling every digital trace of Oscar and Sabrina's conspiracy. His forensic accounting firm had access to tools and databases that could uncover financial patterns invisible to standard investigation methods. "What you're dealing with is more sophisticated than typical marital fraud," Alvin explained as we sat in his high-tech office surrounded by multiple monitors displaying complex financial data. "They've been using techniques I usually see in corporate embezzlement cases: layered transactions, shell accounts, even cryptocurrency conversions, to obscure money trails." The screens showed a web of financial connections that took my breath away. Oscar hadn't just stolen our savings. He'd been systematically moving money through a network of accounts designed to make the funds untraceable. "Look at this pattern," Alvin said, pointing to a timeline of transactions. Small amounts moved to what appears to be a business account for Carter Consulting Services, a company that doesn't actually exist. From there, the money gets transferred to an account in Sabrina's name, then moved again to accounts linked to this Alicia Rivera. The scope was staggering. He created a fake business, complete with business license, tax ID, and banking relationships. Whoever coached him on this strategy knows how to make theft look like legitimate business transactions. Alvin pulled up another screen. But here's where they made their first major mistake. They didn't account for digital forensics. The evidence was overwhelming. Every transaction left digital fingerprints, and Alvin's software could trace money through multiple account transfers, cryptocurrency exchanges, and even cash withdrawals. What Oscar and Sabrina thought was an untraceable theft was actually a perfectly documented trail of financial fraud. "There's more," Alvin continued, opening another file. "I found evidence that this isn't their first collaboration. Look at these transactions from 18 months ago. The records showed smaller amounts. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, moving through the same network of accounts long before Sabrina officially worked at Oscar's firm. They'd been planning this relationship and its financial benefits for far longer than I'd imagined." "They've done this before," I said, staring at the evidence. "Multiple times, with increasing sophistication. And look at this." Alvin pointed to a series of payments to legal firms specializing in contested divorces and mental competency hearings. They've been paying for legal consultations about how to challenge a spouse's mental fitness for over a year. The betrayal went deeper than I'd thought possible. Oscar hadn't just fallen for another woman and gotten carried away. He'd been systematically planning to destroy my life for over a year, possibly longer. My second stop was with May, who had spent the day conducting digital surveillance on Sabrina's network. Her office now looked like a command center, with multiple screens tracking communications, social media activity, and location data. "Sabrina's been remarkably active for someone recovering from surgery," May reported with grim satisfaction. "Look at this." The main screen showed a real-time feed of Sabrina's social media accounts, text messages, and phone calls. Despite being in post-surgical recovery, she'd been coordinating with Alicia Rivera and at least 3 other women following similar playbooks with their own targets. "She's not just Oscar's mistress, she's part of a coordinated network," May explained. "They share strategies, legal contacts, even medical professionals who will provide false documentation when needed." One conversation particularly caught my attention. "Sabrina, surgery went perfectly. Recovery suite is amazing. Oscar, spared no expense. Alicia, good. Ready for pregnancy timeline acceleration? Sabrina, actually want to discuss timeline change. Target's wife seems more financially vulnerable than expected. Might be opportunity for immediate asset grab. Alicia, explain. Sabrina, inheritance was smaller than projected. She's emotionally fragile, financially dependent. Oscar thinks we can trigger mental breakdown, then emergency conservatorship within weeks. My hands clenched as I read their casual discussion of destroying my mental health for financial gain. But there was something else in the conversation that caught my attention. They're accelerating their timeline, I said to May. And they're doing it based on false information about my financial situation, which gives us the perfect opportunity to control their next moves, May replied. If they think you're more vulnerable than expected, they'll get sloppy and make mistakes. The third piece of digital intelligence came from an unexpected source, Harold, who had spent the day monitoring Oscar's communications with the family. As Oscar's brother and business partner in some investments, Harold had legitimate access to several of Oscar's accounts and communications. I found something disturbing, Harold told me over a secure video call. Oscar's been researching your medical history, specifically looking for any evidence of mental health treatment or psychological instability. The violation felt complete. He's been through my private medical records. Worse, he's been corresponding with someone claiming to be your former therapist, trying to get information about your sessions from 2 years ago. Harold's anger was evident even through the video call. The good news is that your actual therapist never responded. Patient confidentiality. But Oscar doesn't know that. He thinks he's gathering evidence of your mental instability. The picture was finally complete. Oscar and Sabrina weren't just planning to steal money. They were building a comprehensive case to have me declared mentally incompetent, gaining control of assets they thought were worth maybe $100,000, but were actually worth $10 million. There's one more thing, Harold added. I've been tracking the timeline of Oscar's behavior changes, the shift in his personality, his treatment of you, his financial secretiveness. It all aligns perfectly with when he started following this Alicia Rivera's playbook. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital forensics showed systematic theft, communication intercepts revealed a coordinated conspiracy, and timeline analysis proved premeditation spanning over a year. Oscar wasn't just cheating, he was following. A professional guide to destroying marriages for financial gain. But they'd made one critical error in all their planning and digital sophistication. They'd assumed their victim was exactly who she appeared to be, a trusting wife with limited resources and no knowledge of their conspiracy. Tomorrow, when Oscar came home from visiting Sabrina in her recovery suite, he was going to encounter a very different version of his wife. One who knew everything, had documented everything, and was ready to use every piece of digital evidence against them. The quiet artist they'd been planning to destroy was about to become the architect of their complete downfall. Diana Wakefield's law office occupied the top floor of a glass tower downtown, with windows that offered a commanding view of the city. The symbolism wasn't lost on me as I sat across from her mahogany desk, surrounded by legal tomes and case files that represented decades of high-stakes divorce litigation. In 30 years of family law, I've never seen documentation this comprehensive, before the opposing party even knows they're being investigated, Diana said, reviewing the evidence folders spread before her. You've essentially handed me a completed case file. She pulled out a yellow legal pad, her movements precise and economical. Let's discuss strategy. We have multiple options, each with different outcomes and timelines. Diana outlined 3 potential approaches: immediate confrontation with demands, for asset recovery, allowing Oscar and Sabrina to proceed with their plan while gathering additional evidence, or what she called controlled detonation, revealing our knowledge at the moment of maximum legal advantage. Given the sophistication of their conspiracy and the involvement of this Alicia Rivera network, I recommend the controlled detonation approach, Diana continued. We let them commit to their most damaging actions, the fake pregnancy, the competency, challenge, the asset transfers, then reveal everything at once. How do we ensure they actually commit to those actions without causing irreversible damage to my position? Diana smiled with the confidence of someone who'd orchestrated dozens of similar takedowns. We feed them information that makes their Current plans seem not just viable, but urgent, and we do it through channels they'll never suspect. My next stop was the district attorney's office, where Jenna had arranged a meeting with her supervisor, Stan Morrison, who headed the Financial Crimes Division. Stan was a man in his 50s with the methodical demeanor of someone who'd spent decades building cases against white-collar criminals. "Mrs. Carter, what you've uncovered appears to extend far beyond your individual situation," Stan said after reviewing May's intelligence on Alicia Rivera's network. "This looks like a RICO case, organized criminal activity with multiple victims, across state lines. The implications were staggering." "You mean this could become a federal investigation?" "It should become a federal investigation. If we can prove this, Alicia Rivera has been coaching women in multiple states to commit marriage fraud, elder abuse, and financial crimes. We're looking at serious federal charges." Stan leaned forward, his interest clearly engaged. "But we need more evidence of the interstate activity and the systematic nature of the conspiracy." Jenna spoke up from beside me. "What if we could provide evidence of active coaching on current cases, not just historical victims, but crimes in progress?" "That would be ideal. Wire intercepts, recorded conversations, documented coaching sessions, anything that shows the criminal conspiracy in action." I pulled out my phone, showing Stan the real-time communications May had been monitoring. "We have ongoing intercepts of conversations between my husband's mistress and this Alicia Rivera. They're planning to accelerate their timeline against me, and they're coordinating with other women running similar operations." Stan's eyes lit up as he scrolled through the messages. "This is exactly what we need. With your permission, I'd like to coordinate with federal authorities to set up a broader investigation. Your case could be the key to taking down an entire network." The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. "What does that mean for my personal situation?" "It means you'll have the full resources of federal law enforcement helping to ensure Oscar and Sabrina face appropriate consequences. It also means their crimes against you become part of a much larger case that could prevent other women from being victimized." My final meeting of the day was with Dr. Patricia Williams, a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. Diana had insisted we get ahead of any mental health challenges Oscar might raise. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you're concerned about potential competency challenges in divorce proceedings," Dr. Williams said in her calm, professional manner. "Given what you've described about your husband's planning, I think a preemptive evaluation would be wise." The irony was perfect. While Oscar was gathering what he thought was evidence of my mental instability, I was getting professional documentation of my complete mental competence. "The evaluation process is comprehensive," Dr. Williams explained. "Psychological testing, interviews, review of medical history, and assessment of decision-making capacity. The goal is to establish baseline documentation of your mental state before any accusations are made." 3 hours later, I walked out with preliminary results that would make Oscar's competency challenge laughably impossible. Dr. Williams had found me to be not just mentally competent, but exceptionally analytical and clear-thinking under pressure. "Your cognitive function test scored in the 95th percentile," she'd noted. "Your emotional regulation and decision-making abilities are well above normal ranges. Any competency challenge would be immediately dismissed with this documentation." As I drove home that evening, I felt the satisfaction of pieces falling perfectly into place. Diana had the legal strategy mapped out, Stan Morrison was coordinating federal investigation resources, and Dr. Williams had provided unshakable documentation of my mental competence. But the most satisfying element was the trap we'd set in motion. Tomorrow, Oscar would receive carefully crafted information designed to make Sabrina and Alicia accelerate their timeline. They would think they were moving in for the kill against a vulnerable, mentally unstable target. Instead, they would be walking directly into a federal investigation that would expose their entire criminal network. My phone buzzed with a text from Oscar. "Sabrina's recovery is going well. We'll be home late tomorrow, need to help her with post-surgery care. I smiled as I typed my response. Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. By the time that conversation happened, Oscar would discover that his trusting, naive wife had become something else entirely, the architect of his destruction. The moment I'd been orchestrating for days finally arrived on a rainy Thursday evening. Oscar walked through our front door at 7:30 p.m., believing he was coming home to a grieving, distracted wife who had no idea her world was about to crumble. Instead, he was walking into the most carefully timed trap I'd ever constructed. I was sitting in our living room with a cup of tea and what appeared to be estate paperwork spread across the coffee table. The picture of a widow, still processing. Her grandmother's death, exactly as Oscar expected to see me. "How's Sabrina feeling?" I asked without looking up from the documents, my voice carrying just the right note of distracted concern. "Better each day. The recovery is harder than expected, but she's a fighter." Oscar settled into his favorite chair, and I could see him studying my posture, my expression, looking for signs of the emotional breakdown he and Sabrina were counting on. "I'm glad she has you to help her through it," I said, finally looking up with what I hoped appeared to be tired gratitude. It must be difficult being responsible for an employee's well-being like that. The slight pause in Oscar's response told me everything I needed to know. He was calculating how much concern was appropriate, how to appear caring without revealing the true nature of his relationship with Sabrina. "She doesn't have much family support," he said carefully. "It's the least I can do." Perfect. He was maintaining the fiction while positioning himself as the noble employer caring for a vulnerable employee. I made a note to myself to ensure Sabrina's extensive family network, which May had documented thoroughly, became part of the evidence file. I sighed heavily and pushed the papers aside. "Oscar, I need to talk to you about something. About us." I saw him tense almost imperceptibly. This was the moment he'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating, the conversation where his emotionally fragile wife would reveal her complete dependence on him. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked, leaning forward with practiced concern. "I've been thinking about Grandma May's death, about how fragile life is, and I realize I've been taking you for granted." I let my voice crack slightly. "I've been so focused on my art, on my own interests, that I haven't been the wife you deserve." Oscar's eyes lit up with something that might have been relief or satisfaction. This was exactly the conversation Alicia Rivera's playbook had predicted. The emotionally vulnerable wife recognizing her failures and desperately trying to reconnect. "Esther, you don't need to—" "No, I do." I stood up, moving to sit on the arm of his chair in a gesture that would seem intimate but actually positioned me to observe his reactions more closely. The inheritance situation has made me realize how little I understand about our finances, about planning for the future. I want to be more involved, more supportive of your decisions. I watched Oscar's face carefully as I delivered the information. That would trigger Sabrina and Alicia's accelerated timeline. "The estate is finally settled. After taxes and expenses, there's about $47,000. Not as much as we hoped, but at least it's something." Oscar's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, a brief flash of calculation before settling back into supportive husband mode. "Every bit helps, sweetheart. We'll invest it wisely." "That's what I want to talk about. I've been thinking we should consolidate everything into joint accounts, make it easier for you to manage. I trust you completely with financial decisions." I paused, delivering the final piece of bait. And honestly, dealing with all this paperwork has been overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like I'm not thinking clearly. The last sentence was crucial. Alicia Rivera's strategy depended on the wife appearing mentally fragile and financially dependent. I was giving Oscar exactly the opening he needed to justify accelerating their competency challenge timeline. "You've been through a lot," Oscar said, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd learned to recognize. Grief affects people differently. Maybe you should talk to someone, a counselor or therapist. Perfect. He was already positioning the idea of professional mental health evaluation, probably planning to have someone in Alicia's network conduct the assessment. Maybe you're right, I said, allowing uncertainty to creep into my voice. Would you help me find someone? I don't even know where to start. Of course. I'll take care of everything. I was certain that by tomorrow, Oscar would be coordinating with Sabrina and Alicia to fast-track their plan. The fake pregnancy timeline would be accelerated, the competency challenge would be moved up, and they would begin positioning for immediate asset seizure based on my apparent mental fragility and financial dependence. They had no idea they were walking into a federal investigation. My phone, lying face down on the coffee table, was recording every word of our conversation. May's surveillance equipment was capturing Oscar's location data, and Jenna's team was monitoring all communications between the co-conspirators. As Oscar excused himself to make some work calls, I knew he was actually coordinating with Sabrina about their accelerated timeline. Within hours, Alicia Rivera would be coaching them on how to exploit my apparent vulnerability for maximum financial gain. But tomorrow morning, instead of finding a confused, dependent wife ready to be manipulated, Oscar would discover that his victim had spent the week assembling a team of federal investigators, forensic accountants, and prosecutors who were ready to dismantle his entire conspiracy. I cleaned up the fake estate paperwork, actual documents from a completely different case that Diana had provided as props, and prepared for the final phase of my counter-operation. In 12 hours, Sabrina would be recovered enough to implement their pregnancy deception. In 12 hours, Oscar would expect to begin the process of having me declared mentally incompetent. In 12 hours, they would discover that the quiet artists they'd been planning to destroy had been systematically documenting their every crime while building an unshakable case for their prosecution. The timing was perfect. They were about to commit their most serious crimes based on information I'd carefully fed them, walking directly into a trap that would ensure they faced the maximum possible consequences for every lie they'd told and every dollar they'd stolen. Smiled as I headed upstairs, looking forward to the most satisfying morning of my life. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of a day that would change everything. I woke early, showered, and dressed carefully in a sharp business suit that Oscar had never seen me wear, the kind of outfit I'd worn during my corporate consulting days when I was dismantling financial fraud operations. Oscar was still asleep when I left the house at 6:30 a.m., heading to a coffee shop 3 blocks from his office building. At exactly 7:45 a.m., as Oscar would be arriving at work, I made the first move in what would become the most devastating Friday of his life. I called his office direct line from a number he wouldn't recognize. Oscar Carter speaking. Mr. Carter, this is Agent Sarah Kellerman with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with you immediately regarding ongoing criminal activity involving your accounts and identity. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear Oscar's mind racing, trying to calculate whether this was real or some kind of mistake. I don't understand. What kind of criminal activity? Sir, we have evidence of systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges related to accounts in your name. I need you to come to our field office immediately, or we'll have to send agents to your workplace. The beauty of the approach was its complete legitimacy. Agent Kellerman was real. Stan Morrison had coordinated with federal authorities to have her make this exact call based on the evidence we'd compiled. Oscar was about to learn that his criminal conspiracy had attracted federal attention. This wait until this afternoon? I have important meetings. Mr. Carter, you're currently under investigation for federal crimes. This cannot wait. We're located at 450 Golden Gate Avenue, Suite 1300. How quickly can you be here? I ended the call and immediately dialed Sabrina's number from another phone. She answered groggily, clearly still recovering from surgery. Sabrina Torres? This is Detective Lisa Chen with the District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you regarding your involvement in systematic marriage fraud and financial conspiracy. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Torres, we have documented evidence of your coordination with Alicia Rivera in targeting married men for financial exploitation. You need to come in for questioning immediately, or we'll be forced to arrest you at your residence. The panic in Sabrina's voice was immediate and complete. I'm recovering from surgery. I can't. Ma'am, recovery from cosmetic procedures funded through theft doesn't exempt you from criminal charges. We'll be at your apartment in 30 minutes. By 8:30 a.m., both Oscar and Sabrina were sitting in separate federal buildings being questioned about crimes they thought were perfectly hidden. Neither knew the other was also being interrogated, and neither had any idea how much evidence had been compiled against them. But the real trap was just beginning. At 9:15 a.m., while Oscar was trying to explain to federal agents why he'd created shell companies and moved money through cryptocurrency accounts, I was sitting in Diana Wakefield's office executing the next phase of our plan. The emergency asset freeze has been approved, Diana informed me, hanging up from a call with a federal judge. All accounts connected to Oscar's name are now frozen pending investigation of criminal activity. This included the joint accounts. Oscar had already emptied the secret accounts he'd created. And most importantly, the accounts where he'd hidden the money he'd stolen from me. Every dollar he thought he'd successfully transferred was now locked under federal authority. At 9:30 a.m., Alicia Rivera received a call that would destroy her entire operation. Ms. Rivera, this is U.S. Attorney Michael Torres. Your coaching service for marriage fraud has been under federal investigation for 6 months. We have evidence of your involvement in crimes across multiple states, and we're prepared to file RICO charges against your entire network. The coordinated takedown was beautiful in its precision. While Oscar and Sabrina sat in interrogation rooms trying to explain their individual crimes, federal agents were simultaneously raiding Alicia Rivera's offices, seizing her client files, and discovering the full scope of her marriage destruction business. By 10 a.m., Harold was calling me with updates from his position as Oscar's emergency contact. The FBI contacted me about Oscar being detained for questioning, Harold said, his voice a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. They're asking about his character, his financial history, whether I've observed any suspicious behavior. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, that my brother has been acting strangely for months, that I've been concerned about his financial decisions, and that I've documented several conversations where he seemed to be planning something involving his marriage. The final piece of the trap activated at 10:30 a.m., when May called to confirm that Sabrina's apartment was being searched under federal warrant. They found everything, May reported with satisfaction. The false pregnancy test kits, the correspondence with Alicia Rivera, even a notebook detailing her strategy for your husband's case. She documented her own crimes. But the most satisfying moment came at 11 a.m. when I received a call from Agent Kellerman. Mrs. Carter, your husband is asking to speak with you. He claims this is all a misunderstanding and that you can verify his innocence. I smiled, looking out the window of Diana's office at the city below. Tell him I'll be happy to speak with him. But first, I think he should know that his wife isn't who he thought she was. What do you mean? Agent Kellerman, I'm the one who provided all the evidence for this investigation. Every document, every recording, every piece of financial data you're using to question him, I compiled it while he thought I was grieving and distracted. The pause on the other end was telling. You've been investigating your own husband? I've been investigating a criminal conspiracy that happened to involve my husband. There's a difference. By noon, the trap was completely sprung. Oscar and Sabrina were in federal custody, Alicia Rivera's offices were being raided, and frozen asset recovery was already beginning. The network that had destroyed dozens of marriages was being systematically dismantled, and I was sitting in a lawyer's office, finally ready to confront the man who'd planned to steal my life while I planned to reclaim it. The federal courthouse, felt like a cathedral of justice as I walked through its marble corridors 6 months later, flanked by Diana Wakefield and U.S. Attorney Michael Torres. Today was the day Oscar, Sabrina, and Alicia Rivera would learn the consequences of their conspiracy to destroy my life. The courtroom was packed with an unusual mix of spectators, other victims of Alicia Rivera's network, federal agents who'd worked the case, and members of both my family and Oscar's, who'd come to witness the conclusion of what had become one of the largest marriage fraud prosecutions in federal history. Harold sat in the front row behind me, his presence a reminder that not everyone in Oscar's family had abandoned their moral compass. He'd become my strongest ally among the Carters, testifying extensively about his brother's character transformation and suspicious financial behavior. Judge Rebecca Martinez called the court to order, her stern expression making it clear that she'd reviewed every detail of the case files. The evidence had grown far beyond my individual situation. Federal investigators had uncovered 37 victims across 12 states, with total financial losses exceeding $4 million. The defendants stand accused of operating a criminal enterprise designed to systematically destroy marriages for financial gain. Judge Martinez began. The scope and sophistication of this conspiracy represents one of the most calculated schemes of marital fraud this court has encountered. Alicia Rivera was called first. The woman who'd built an empire teaching others to destroy marriages sat at the defendant's table looking nothing like the confident manipulator I'd imagined. Federal prosecution had a way of stripping away the veneer of sophistication from criminals. Rivera, you stand convicted of racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. The court has reviewed victim impact statements from 37 women whose lives you helped destroy for profit. Judge Martinez's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Your operation generated over $2 million in revenue by teaching women to prey on married men and devastate their families. The sentences for your crimes will reflect the systematic nature of your actions. Alicia Rivera received 25 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. Her assets, including the luxury home and expensive cars, funded by her marriage destruction business, were seized for victim restitution. Sabrina was next. Watching her stand before the judge, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and pity. She was 24 years old, and she'd thrown away her entire future for cosmetic surgery funded by stolen money. Ms. Torres, your role in this conspiracy involved targeting and manipulating multiple married men, resulting in financial losses exceeding $400,000. Your documented communications show a calculated approach to emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. The core evidence against Sabrina was overwhelming. Her own notebooks, seized during the federal raid, contained detailed strategies for manipulating emotions, faking pregnancies, and positioning herself as a victim while destroying marriages. She documented her own crimes with the thoroughness of someone who never imagined being caught. Your sentence of 15 years in federal prison reflects both your active participation in this conspiracy and your role in causing severe emotional trauma to multiple victims and their families. But it was Oscar's sentencing that I'd been waiting for. My husband of 8 years stood before the judge wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled, looking nothing like the charming architect who'd convinced me to trust him with our future. Mr. Carter, your case represents perhaps the most personally devastating aspect of this conspiracy. You didn't just participate in criminal fraud, you betrayed the most fundamental trust possible between married partners. Judge Martinez reviewed the specific charges: theft of marital assets, identity fraud, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and attempted mental competency fraud. The last charge was particularly damning. Oscar's plan to have me declared mentally incompetent to gain control of assets was considered among the most serious violations of spousal trust the court had seen. The evidence shows you systematically planned to destroy your wife's financial security, mental health, and legal capacity. You researched her medical history, gathered false evidence of instability, and coordinated with criminals to steal assets you believed were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. Oscar had committed federal crimes to steal what he thought was a modest inheritance, not knowing he was actually targeting $10 million. His greed had been surpassed only by his complete miscalculation of his victim. Your sentence of 20 years in federal prison reflects the premeditated nature of your crimes and the violation of fundamental marital trust. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution of all stolen assets, plus damages for emotional distress. As the defendants were led away in shackles, I felt not triumph, but a profound sense of closure. The man I'd married no longer existed, if he ever had. The person who'd stood before the judge was someone who'd planned to destroy my life for money, someone I'd never actually known, despite 8 years of marriage. Outside the courthouse, Diana handed me a check representing the full recovery of my stolen assets, plus additional damages that had been awarded by the court. "All your money has been recovered," she said, "plus interest, penalties, and punitive damages." The federal seizure of their assets was remarkably thorough, but the most satisfying vindication came from U.S. Attorney Torres. "Mrs. Carter, your investigation and evidence compilation was instrumental in dismantling an entire criminal network. Because of your work, 37 other victims will receive justice and restitution." I looked back at the courthouse steps, thinking about the woman who'd sat in a hospital room 6 months ago, learning that her husband had stolen their life, savings for his mistress's surgery. That woman had been devastated, betrayed, and seemingly powerless. The woman walking down these steps was someone entirely different, someone who'd learned that justice wasn't something that happened to you, but something you had to fight for, and build systematically, piece by piece. The quiet artist they'd underestimated had become an architect of justice. And unlike their conspiracy built on lies and theft, the structure I'd built was unshakable, permanent, and absolutely devastating to anyone who'd thought they could destroy my life without consequences. 2 years after the courthouse steps, I stood in a very different kind of building, a converted warehouse in downtown that housed the headquarters of the Sentinel Foundation, the nonprofit organization I'd established to help other women navigate financial fraud within marriages. Therapi, morning light streamed through tall windows as I reviewed the case files scattered across my desk. Each folder represented a woman who'd reached out for help after discovering her husband's betrayal, and each one reminded me why this work had become my true calling. "Esther, the 10 o'clock consultation is here," said Jenna, who'd left the Attorney General's office to become the Foundation's Director of Investigation. "Jennifer Walsh, the case from Sacramento, where the husband emptied the children's college funds for his girlfriend's business venture." I smiled at the familiar pattern. Men who stole from their families rarely showed creativity in their justifications. Let me guess, she has no idea about her legal options and thinks she's powerless because he controlled the finances? Exactly. But she also mentioned something interesting. She thinks her husband might be following some kind of playbook. His behavior matches other cases we've seen. The Alicia Rivera network had been dismantled, but others had emerged to fill the void. The business of teaching people to destroy marriages for profit was apparently too lucrative to die with one prosecution. May entered the office carrying a fresh investigation file. "We've got confirmation on the Portland case. 3 more women, all married to men who started relationships with women from the same social media group. They're being coached by someone, calling herself Life Enhancement Consultant Rebecca Stone." "Same methods as Rivera?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Identical playbook. Target financially comfortable married men, create emotional dependency, then systematically extract assets while positioning for long-term financial benefit. They're even using the same fake pregnancy and mental competency strategies." The work had evolved far beyond my personal revenge into something that felt like a true mission. The Sentinel Foundation now employed 12 full-time investigators, maintained relationships with federal law enforcement agencies, and had helped recover over $15 million for fraud victims. But the most satisfying aspect wasn't the money recovered or the criminals prosecuted. It was the transformation I witnessed in the women who came to us. They arrived feeling powerless, betrayed, and often blaming themselves for not seeing the warning signs. They left understanding that they'd been targeted by sophisticated predators and equipped with the tools to reclaim their lives. Harold stopped by my office most afternoons, having become both a board member of the foundation and one of my closest friends. The man who'd once been my brother-in-law was now something more valuable, a reminder that decent people existed and that family could be chosen rather than inherited. "Any word from the federal task force?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "They're announcing the indictments next week. 18 people across 6 states, all connected to these life coaching services that teach women to destroy marriages." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the satisfaction of another network about to crumble. It's becoming a specialized field of law enforcement. My phone buzzed with a text from someone I'd never expected to hear from again. Diana Wakefield. New client, high-profile case. Husband is a federal judge. Wife just discovered $2 million missing and a 20-year affair. She specifically asked for the woman who took down the Rivera network. Interested? I looked around my office, at the case files of women whose lives had been systematically destroyed by people they trusted, at the wall of photographs showing successful prosecutions and recovered assets, at the team of investigators who'd chosen to fight this particular kind of evil. 2 years ago, I'd been a naive artist who trusted completely and questioned nothing. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had instead revealed who I really was underneath the surface, someone with the analytical skills to uncover complex fraud, the determination to see justice through to completion, and the strategic thinking to turn personal devastation into a force for protecting others. Oscar had wanted to steal my inheritance and leave me with nothing. Instead, his betrayal had given me something far more valuable than money, a purpose that used every skill I possessed and a mission that grew stronger with each woman we helped reclaim her life. I picked up my phone and texted Diana back. "Send. Me, everything you have. We'll take the case." The quiet artist was gone forever. In her place was someone who'd learned that the most devastating revenge wasn't personal. It was systematic, permanent, and designed to prevent anyone else from suffering the same betrayal. Justice, I'd discovered, was the best kind of art, and I'd become very good at creating it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.